This is an urgent message from heaven, and it does not arrive gently. It does not come wrapped in comfort or delay. It comes with authority, precision, and divine timing. God has already approved your breakthrough. This part is settled. The signature has been written in heaven. The permission has been granted. The resources have been aligned. But now comes the part many are not prepared for. Archangel Michael is issuing a warning, not to frighten you, but to awaken you. There is one final test standing between you and what God has already said yes to. And this test is not about waiting longer, praying harder, or becoming more perfect. It is about action. Immediate, obedient, faith-driven action. Fail to act now, and the door will close, not because God changed his mind, but because divine doors are governed by timing, not emotion. You must understand this clearly from the beginning. Approval does not mean automatic possession. Heaven often approves before earth moves. God releases permission, but humans must respond. This is where destinies are either activated or delayed. And this is why this message feels so intense. Something in your spirit already knows this is real. You felt the pressure. You sensed the urgency. You've noticed that familiar restlessness that no amount of comfort can silence. That is not anxiety. That is not fear. That is the sound of heaven signaling movement. When God approves a breakthrough, heaven shifts. But when humans hesitate, heaven waits, and waiting has a limit. Archangel Michael appears in scripture and spiritual history at moments of decisive transition. He does not come to announce beginnings, he comes to guard thresholds. He stands at doors that are about to open or close. And right now, he is standing at yours. This is not symbolic language. This is spiritual reality. There are seasons where grace covers delay, and then there are moments where delay becomes disobedience. You are standing in one of those moments now. The test before you is subtle but severe. It will not look like temptation. It will look like logic. It will sound like reason. It will whisper, wait a little longer. Prepare more. Make sure it's safe. But heaven is saying, move. This is why the warning is so direct. Fail to act now, and the door will close. Not slammed shut. Not with chaos. It will close quietly. You will still be loved. You will still be provided for. But the version of your life that was meant to unfold through that door will remain unseen. Many people mistake God's patience for permanent availability. But divine opportunities operate in windows. They open, they invite, and then they pass. And once they pass, they do not always return in the same form. You were not meant to hear this message by accident. Messages like this do not find crowds. They find individuals. God speaks to nations through prophets, but he warns individuals through alignment. Something aligned for you to hear this now, at this exact moment. That alignment itself is proof that heaven is involved. God does not rush people unnecessarily. When he accelerates language, it is because delay has become dangerous. And when Archangel Michael is mentioned, it is because spiritual resistance increases right before breakthrough manifests. Hear this carefully. The final test is not about proving your worth. Your worth is already settled. The final test is about agreement. Will you agree with heaven's timing, or will you insist on your own? Will you move when God says move, or will you wait until it feels comfortable? Faith that waits for clarity is no longer faith, it is control disguised as wisdom. And this test exposes that difference. Right now, the spiritual atmosphere around you is charged. Heaven has leaned in. Angels are not pushing you. They are watching you. Watching to see if you will step when prompted. watching to see if you will speak when told, watching to see if you will release what God already told you to release. This is not about striving. This is about obedience. Quiet, decisive, obedient movement. The reason this feels heavy is because the stakes are real. What is on the other side of this door is not small. It is influence. It is assignment. It is expansion. And that is exactly why resistance intensifies at this point. The enemy does not fight beginnings, he fights thresholds. And Archangel Michael does not warn without cause. His warning is not meant to scare you into panic, but to pull you out of delay. If you've been waiting for one last confirmation, this is it. If you've been asking God for clarity, this is clarity. The breakthrough has been approved. Heaven is not undecided. The only variable left is your response. And the time to respond is now. Hold this moment carefully, because what comes next will reveal what the final test truly is, and why so many people fail it without even realizing they were tested at all. There is a reason this message did not pass you by. Out of countless voices, notifications, and moments competing for your attention, this one reached you. That alone tells a story. Heaven did not scatter urgent messages randomly. When God needs a response, he targets the receiver. This is not about chance, algorithms, or coincidence. This is about alignment. Something in your life has reached a point where heaven said, now. And when heaven says now, it means something has already been set in motion behind the scenes. Many people hear about breakthrough. Fewer are positioned to receive one. And even fewer are trusted with the warning that comes before it. This message found you because you are standing at a decision point, not a learning point. You are not being informed, you are being summoned. There is a difference. Information educates, but summons require movement. You have already been prepared more than you realize. The reason this feels intense is because it is not introducing something new, it is activating something dormant. You may have noticed that over time, familiar things stopped satisfying you. What once felt safe now feels restrictive. What once brought peace now brings restlessness. This is not dissatisfaction. It is divine tension. God creates tension when it is time to move. If he allowed you to stay too comfortable, you would never step into what he approved. So he disrupts comfort gently at first, then firmly. This message is part of the disruption. Understand this clearly. Not everyone who is chosen is willing. God chooses many, but only a few respond when timing demands courage. That is why messages like this do not go to crowds. They go to individuals who are capable of obedience under pressure. You are being trusted with urgency because heaven already knows your capacity. The test ahead is not designed to break you. It is designed to reveal whether you will agree with what God already decided. There is also something else happening that you may not have recognized yet. When a breakthrough is approved, the enemy often shifts strategy. He stops attacking loudly and starts distracting subtly. He fills your mind with reasonable delays. He encourages preparation without end. He pushes responsibility, not rebellion. Because rebellion is obvious, but hesitation looks holy. This is why this moment matters so much. You are not being asked to fight. You are being asked to move. This message found you because your obedience will affect more than just you. There are people connected to your yes who will never hear God the way you do. There are outcomes attached to your action that heaven intends to release through you, not around you. When God approves a breakthrough, it is rarely just for personal comfort. It is for alignment, impact, and assignment. And that assignment requires someone willing to step when instructed. If this message is stirring something deep inside you, that is confirmation. The Spirit recognizes truth before the mind understands it. You did not need to analyze your way into this moment. You felt it. That feeling is not pressure. It is recognition. Something in you knows this message is personal. And when a message is personal, it requires response, not passive listening. This is why engagement matters right now, not for numbers, but for alignment. When you like this message, when you share it, when you comment in agreement, you are not just interacting with a platform, you are signaling readiness. Obedience often begins with small visible actions before larger invisible ones are required. If this message resonates with you, respond to it. Share it with someone who needs confirmation. Subscribe to this channel so you remain aligned with what heaven is releasing in this season. These actions are not about support alone. They are about positioning yourself to hear clearly as timing accelerates. Do not underestimate the power of agreement. When you engage, you are saying, "I hear this, and I am open." Heaven responds to openness. Resistance grows where agreement is delayed. This is not about perfection. It is about willingness. God does not require you to understand everything before you move. He requires you to trust the instruction enough to take the next step. You may still feel questions rising, and that is normal. Faith does not eliminate questions. It overrides them. The final test you are approaching will not ask you if you have all the answers. It will ask you if you are willing to obey without them. That is why this message came now, before the test appears obvious. Heaven prepares you internally before events unfold externally. Right now, you are being separated, not from people, but from hesitation, from delay disguised as wisdom, from waiting seasons that have already expired. This message found you because your season is shifting from preparation to execution. And execution requires courage, not comfort. Pay attention to what begins to stir after this. Pay attention to the nudge that refuses to leave, the idea that keeps returning, the instruction that feels simple but demanding. That is where the test will appear. And when it does, you will remember this moment. You will remember that heaven warned you, not to frighten you, but to prepare you. Because what comes next will clarify everything. There are moments in life when everything becomes unusually quiet, not because nothing is happening, but because everything is about to happen at once. This is one of those moments. Heaven is watching closely now, not in judgment but in attention. When a breakthrough has been approved and the final test approaches, the spiritual atmosphere changes. The noise reduces. Distractions feel weaker. Time feels heavier. That is because you have entered a sacred pause, the moment just before movement. Scripture shows this pattern repeatedly. Before seas part, before walls fall, before promises manifest, there is a stillness where heaven observes human response. This is not the stillness of rest. This is the stillness of decision. Angels are not idle in this moment. They are positioned. Assignments are prepared. Routes are mapped. Resistance is measured. But none of it activates until you move. This is the part many people must understand. They believe heaven moves first, then they follow. But often, heaven waits for alignment. When God approved your breakthrough, He authorized movement. But authorization requires participation. That participation is what heaven is watching for now. You may feel as though nothing is happening externally, yet internally everything feels alert. The thoughts are sharper. Convictions feel clear. Delays feel heavier than usual. This is not pressure from fear, it is pressure from purpose. Heaven applies this pressure not to crush you, but to focus you. When something matters deeply, heaven reduces the margin for distraction. That is what you are experiencing now. In this moment, angels observe patterns. They watch what you prioritize. They watch what you postpone. They watch whether you obey partial instruction or wait for full certainty. And this is where the final test begins to form. It does not arrive dramatically. It arrives quietly, disguised as a small decision, a conversation you feel prompted to have, a step you feel nutty to take, a release you know you should make. The test is simple, but the weight behind it is immense. Archangel Michael's presence in moments like this is not accidental. He stands as a witness to courage. He does not intervene to force obedience. He guards the threshold while you decide. This is why delay feels different now. Before, waiting felt peaceful. Now waiting feels heavy. That is because the season has changed. What once was patience has now become hesitation. And heaven is watching to see if you recognize the difference. This is also why old comforts feel less comforting. Heaven gently removes the satisfaction from what you have outgrown so you will not mistake stagnation for safety. You are not being rushed. You are being aligned. The silence you feel is not absence. It is attention. Heaven has leaned in, waiting to see if you will respond to what you already know. Many people fail this moment not because they disobey openly, but because they delay politely. They wait for signs they already receive. They pray for confirmation they already felt. They seek counsel not for wisdom, but for permission to hesitate. And heaven waits, but not forever. This is the moment where trust becomes visible through action. Right now, you are closer than you think. The distance between where you are and where you are meant to be is not measured in years or effort. It is measured in obedience. One step, one response, one act of courage. That is all that separates observation from activation. Before we go any further, this is where I need to speak directly to your spirit about the mission behind this message. As this truth settles into your heart, hear this as a divine invitation, not a request. When you sow into this work through super thanks, membership, or PayPal, you are not supporting a channel. You are releasing light into lives that are still waiting for clarity. I hear the Lord saying, as you pour oil into this altar, I will pour oil into your obedience. Your giving becomes a river that carries this message to souls standing at their own thresholds. I am speaking to you personally now. This is your moment to respond as heaven watches. Do not delay what God is prompting you to do. Obey by supporting this mission today, using the PayPal link or QR code in the description. And watch how God honors your obedience with open heavens. Now return with me to this moment, because heaven is still watching. You are not alone in this pause. You are being observed, supported, and prepared. But observation does not equal intervention. Movement does. The moment you act, angels move with you. Resistance shift. Pathways open. What felt blocked begins to yield. This is why this moment matters more than you realize. And here is the truth many do not hear. Heaven celebrates obedience more than outcomes. The breakthrough is already approved. The celebration is waiting on your response. Type I am ready to move in the comments if this resonates with you. Blessing code 431 is now activated. Hold on. What comes next will reveal the exact nature of the test that decides everything. When Archangel Michael enters a narrative, it is never casual and never symbolic. His presence marks moments of spiritual decision, not emotional reflection. He does not appear to comfort indecision. He appears to confront it. Throughout spiritual history, Michael stands at the line between advance and retreat, between obedience and delay, between fulfillment and forfeiture. That is why his warning matters so deeply in this season. He is not here to announce a beginning. He is here to guard a threshold. Final tests are not random obstacles. They are divine filters. They reveal alignment, not strength. And Michael's role is not to test you himself, but to stand witness to whether you will cross when heaven has opened the way. This is crucial to understand, because many people assume the final test will look dramatic, painful, or overwhelming. Most of the time, it does not. It looks ordinary. It looks quiet. It looks like a choice you could easily delay without anyone noticing, except heaven. Michael's presence signals that spiritual warfare has intensified, but not in the way people expect. This is not warfare of chaos. It is warfare of timing. The enemy's strategy at this stage is not destruction. It is postponement. If he can delay you long enough, the door closes on its own. No battle required. No obvious failure. Just misalignment. Michael stands as a reminder that timing itself is sacred, and violating it has consequences. At final thresholds, heaven does not shout. It watches. And Michael's role is to protect the integrity of God's order. He does not negotiate timing. He enforces it. This is why the urgency you feel is not emotional. It is spiritual. Something in the unseen realm knows that movement must happen now. That knowing is being impressed upon you not through fear but through pressure that refuses to lift. You may be wondering why this test feels different from others you have faced. In the past, tests demanded endurance. This one demands courage. In the past, you were asked to wait. Now, you are being asked to move. That shift alone tells you everything about where you are in your journey. Waiting seasons are preparatory. Movement seasons are decisive. Michael appears at the decisive ones. Another critical truth is this: the final test is not about whether you believe God can do it. It is about whether you trust Him enough to step when logic hesitates. Faith that only believes in possibility does not pass this test. Faith that obeys instruction does. Michael's presence highlights this distinction. He does not respond to intention. He responds to action. This is also why fear often feels more subtle now. It does not scream. It reasons. It calculates. It presents itself as wisdom. It says this isn't the right time. It says you need more preparation. It says, what if you're wrong? These thoughts feel responsible, but they are not neutral. They are designed to keep you standing still while the door remains open just long enough to test your resolve. Michael does not remove these thoughts for you. He allows them to surface so your choice becomes clear. Will you obey despite them, or will you obey them instead? That is the essence of the final test. And the reason it matters so much is because what lies beyond this threshold carries weight. Influence. Expansion. Responsibility. Heaven does not release such things to those who require perfect conditions to obey. You may also notice that people around you seem less supportive than expected. This is not punishment. This is precision. At thresholds, God often removes external reinforcement so obedience becomes personal, not performative. Michael stands with you in this solitude, not to comfort you, but to witness your courage. Heaven wants to know, will you move when no one claps, when no one agrees, when no one reassures you? The answer to that question determines access. Understand this clearly. Failing the final test does not mean your life collapses. It means your life continues, just without the expansion that was available. Grace remains. Love remains. But certain doors do not reopen once timing expires. Michael's warning is not harsh, it is merciful. He alerts you before that expiration occurs. Right now, you are being invited to choose alignment over explanation, movement over mastery, trust over certainty. This is why the instruction feels simple but heavy. Simple because it is clear. Heavy because it matters. You are not being rushed into recklessness. You are being called into agreement. The breakthrough has already been approved. The resources are already aligned. The only thing left unresolved is whether you will step forward while the door is still open. Michael is still standing at that door, and heaven is still watching. This is where many people misunderstand what God is asking of them. When they hear the words final test, they immediately assume it will demand more effort, more endurance, more spiritual intensity. They think they must prove how strong they are, how faithful they have been, or how much they deserve the breakthrough. But this test is not about strength at all. Strength was required in earlier seasons. Obedience is required now. And obedience, unlike strength, cannot be displayed through intention alone. It must be demonstrated through action. You have already proven that you can endure. You have already shown that you can wait, pray, and persevere. That is why heaven is no longer measuring your patience. Heaven is measuring your response. The final test does not ask, "Can you survive?" It asks, "Will you obey when survival instincts tell you to pause?" This is a very different kind of test, and it catches many people off guard because it feels almost too simple. Obedience often looks unimpressive to the human eye. It does not always feel powerful in the moment. Sometimes it feels like stepping without applause, moving without assurance, or releasing something before a replacement appears. That is why obedience is such a strong indicator of trust. Anyone can obey when the outcome is guaranteed. Very few obey when the outcome is promised but not yet visible. That is the space you are standing in now. One of the greatest misconceptions is believing that prayer alone passes this test. Prayer prepares you, but obedience positions you. You can pray for clarity endlessly and still fail this moment if you refuse to move when clarity arrives. There is a point where prayer becomes avoidance if it is used to delay action. God does not reveal His will so that you can admire it. He reveals it so that you can act on it. This is why the instruction you feel now may seem almost uncomfortable in its simplicity. It may not require a dramatic sacrifice or a public declaration. It may require a quiet yes where no one sees. It may require letting go of something familiar. It may require initiating something you have been postponing. These acts feel small, but they carry enormous spiritual weight because they prove alignment. Obedience also exposes where trust truly lies. Many people trust God's power but not His timing. They believe He can open doors, but they struggle to believe He knows when those doors should be entered. The final test confronts this tension directly. Will you trust that God's timing is wiser than your caution? Will you believe that moving now is safer than waiting for perfect conditions? Another reason this test feels difficult is because obedience removes control. Strength allows you to feel capable. Obedience requires you to feel dependent. That dependence is not weakness. It is relationship. God is not asking you to perform. He is asking you to partner. And partnership requires responsiveness, not resistance. You may notice that your mind keeps returning to one specific instruction, even as you try to think about other things. That is not coincidence. Heaven is not overwhelming you with multiple demands. It is focusing you on one point of obedience. This is intentional. Final tests are rarely complex. They are precise, and precision makes avoidance harder. There is also a subtle fear that often surfaces here, the fear of acting too soon. Many people would rather risk acting too late than act too early. But delayed obedience is still disobedience when timing had been set. God does not punish hesitation, but timing does. Opportunities governed by divine timing are not flexible indefinitely. They are windows, and windows do not argue, they close. This is why partial obedience is not enough in this season. Doing something close to what God asked is not the same as doing what He asked. Adjusting the instruction to feel safer is still resistance. Heaven honors obedience that aligns fully, not selectively. And this is not because God is strict, but because alignment requires accuracy. You are not being asked to leap blindly. You are being asked to step where light has already been given. The next step may not illuminate the entire path, but it does not need to. Obedience is about responding to what you know, not demanding knowledge of what comes after. If you are honest with yourself, you already know what the instruction is. You may not like it. You may not feel ready for it, but you recognize it. That recognition is not pressure, it is invitation. God trusts you enough to invite you into movement rather than keeping you in preparation. This is also why the enemy's voice feels quieter but more persistent now. He is not trying to stop you outright. He is trying to slow you down just enough to miss the moment. He knows that once obedience is executed, resistance loses leverage. So he targets hesitation. Do not mistake discomfort for danger. Obedience often feels uncomfortable because it stretches you into unfamiliar territory. But unfamiliar does not mean unsafe when God has already approved the outcome. The breakthrough is not waiting on your strength. It is waiting on your agreement. This is the heart of the final test. Not how strong you are, but how willing you are. Not how much you can endure, but how quickly you can respond. And once obedience is released, what felt heavy will begin to move. Because heaven always responds to obedience. One of the most dangerous assumptions people make is believing that doors only open with noise. They expect dramatic signs, public confirmation, or undeniable external shifts. But most divine doors open quietly. They open internally before they ever open visibly. That is why many people walk past open doors without realizing what they are standing in front of. In this season, the signs are not outside of you. They are happening within you. And those internal signals are not random. They are indicators that the door you have been praying for is already open. One of the clearest signs is urgency that refuses to fade. Not panic, not anxiety, but a steady inner pressure that keeps returning no matter how much you distract yourself. You try to rest, but the thought comes back. You try to postpone, but the nudge remains. That persistence is not your imagination. It is alignment pressing against delay. When God opens a door, He often places urgency in the spirit before opportunity appears in the natural. That urgency is heaven's way of saying, "This is active now." Another sign is a growing discomfort with staying where you are. Things that once felt stable now feel stagnant. Conversations feel repetitive. Environments feel smaller. Even success begins to feel limiting. This does not mean you are ungrateful. It means you are outgrowing your current position. Doors open when growth exceeds containment. And when that happens, God removes the satisfaction from what can no longer hold you. You may also notice an increase in clarity about what you should do next, even if you lack clarity about how it will unfold. The what feels firm, but the how feels incomplete. This is intentional. God often withholds the full picture so that obedience, not control, becomes the motivation. If you had all the details, you might move confidently, but confidence is not the goal. Trust is. Another sign the door is open is repeated confirmation from unexpected places. A phrase you hear multiple times. A message that aligns too precisely to ignore. A conversation that mirrors your private thoughts. These are not coincidences. They are alignment echoes. God speaks consistently when timing is critical. He does not confuse you in moments that require action. If the message keeps returning, it is because the door remains open, for now. Restlessness is another indicator people often misinterpret. They think restlessness means something is wrong. In reality, holy restlessness means something is ready. When a season has fulfilled its purpose, peace no longer comes from staying, it comes from moving. That is why staying begins to feel heavy. The weight you feel is not burden, it is readiness. You may also sense resistance increasing, not externally but internally. Doubt tries to reason. Fear tries to slow you. Logic tries to negotiate. This internal resistance does not mean the door is closed. It often means the door is open and opposition knows it. Resistance intensifies at points of transition because once you cross, leverage is lost. The enemy does not fight closed doors. He fights open ones. Another subtle but powerful sign is the loss of excitement for alternatives. Options that once tempted you now feel irrelevant. Backup plans feel hollow. You realize that even if other paths are available, they do not satisfy the calling you feel. This narrowing is not limitation, it is focus. God reduces options when it is time to commit. You might also notice that time feels different. Days feel compressed. Weeks move quickly. Or conversely, waiting feels unusually long even when little time has passed. This distortion of time perception often happens when you are standing at a threshold. Heaven's timing begins to press against earthly rhythms, creating a sense that something must happen soon. There is also a quiet confidence beneath the uncertainty. Even though you do not have all the answers, something deep within you knows that moving forward is right. This confidence does not shout. It whispers. It is calm, steady, and persistent. It does not argue. It waits for agreement. Another sign the door is open is that excuses feel weaker than they used to. Reasons for delay no longer satisfy you. You hear yourself explaining why you haven't moved, and even you are no longer convinced. This is not condemnation. It is awareness. Awareness signals readiness. You may even feel a strange mix of fear and excitement. Fear because the step requires courage. Excitement because something in you recognizes destiny. This combination is common at open doors. If there were no fear, the step would not require faith. If there were no excitement, it would not be aligned. Finally, one of the clearest signs the door is already open is this. The cost of staying now feels higher than the cost of moving. You realize that remaining where you are will require more emotional energy than stepping forward. Comfort has become expensive, and movement, though uncertain, feels lighter. These signs are not meant to overwhelm you. They are meant to inform you. Heaven does not open doors silently and then punish you for not noticing. It signals, repeatedly, gently at first, then firmly. You are not behind. You are not late. You are standing at the door. The question is no longer whether the door is open. The question is whether you will walk through it while it still is. Hesitation rarely announces itself as rebellion. It arrives quietly, dressed in responsibility, wisdom, and caution. It sounds reasonable. It feels justified. And that is exactly why it is so dangerous at this stage. When a door has already been opened by heaven, hesitation does not preserve safety, it slowly erodes opportunity. This is not meant to instill fear, but to bring clarity. Understanding what hesitation does will help you recognize why this moment matters more than you think. When people hesitate, they often assume nothing will change. Life will continue. Provision will remain. Relationships will hold. And in many cases, that is true. God's grace does not disappear because of one delayed decision. But opportunity operates differently than grace. Grace is patient. Opportunity is precise. When you hesitate at a divinely timed door, the first thing that happens is not loss. It is shift. The atmosphere begins to change quietly. One of the earliest consequences of hesitation is spiritual dullness. What once felt clear begins to blur. The urgency that once pressed you gently starts to fade. Not because the door closed immediately, but because alignment weakened. His stillness often feels like relief at first. The pressure lifts. The tension eases. But what you are feeling is not peace. It is disengagement. Heaven steps back when response is delayed, not in punishment, but in respect for your choice. Another result of hesitation is that courage begins to drain. Courage is not a permanent state. It is a resource tied to timing. When heaven releases courage, it is meant to be used. If it is not acted upon, it does not stay at the same intensity. What felt doable yesterday begins to feel intimidating tomorrow. This is why people often say, "I don't know why I was so bold before." The boldness was timed, and timing was missed. Hesitation also invites distraction. When you do not move forward, your mind begins to scatter sideways. You become busy but not effective, active but not aligned. You may fill your schedule, take on new responsibilities, or pursue safe alternatives. None of these things are inherently wrong, but they can quietly replace obedience with occupation, and occupation feels productive enough to justify delay. Over time, hesitation reshapes perspective. You begin to reinterpret the original instruction. You downplay its importance. You tell yourself it was symbolic, emotional, or premature. This reinterpretation is a coping mechanism. It helps you feel at peace with not acting. But peace built on reinterpretation is fragile. Deep down, something still knows. Another consequence is that the door itself begins to narrow. Divine doors do not always slam shut. More often, they become less accessible. And then people move. Circumstances shift. What once aligned easily now requires more effort, more negotiation, more explanation. This narrowing is not punishment. It is timing expiring. Windows close gradually before they close completely. You may also notice that others begin to move into spaces you once felt drawn to. This is not because what was meant for you was stolen. It is because opportunities often require participants, not placeholders. When someone else steps forward, it highlights what hesitation costs. And this realization can sting, not because you failed, but because you recognize what could have been. Another subtle effect of hesitation is internal frustration. You may feel irritated without knowing why. Small things bother you. Rest feels less restorative. This frustration is not random. It comes from misalignment. You are carrying unexpressed obedience, and that weight manifests emotionally. The soul was designed to move when instructed. When it doesn't, tension builds. Hesitation can also distort your view of God. You may begin to question whether you heard him correctly. Not because he was unclear, but because acting now feels harder than doubting then. Doubt becomes easier than obedience when courage fades. This is why many people end up blaming confusion when the real issue was delay. It is important to understand this. Hesitation does not mean God abandons you. It means the season shifts without you. God continues working. Grace continues flowing. But the specific pathway tied to that door does not wait indefinitely. And when that pathway closes, God does not shame you. He redirects you. But redirection is not the same as fulfillment. Many people live full lives without ever realizing they hesitated at a defining moment. They sense it vaguely, like a quiet regret they cannot name. They wonder why certain things never unfolded. They tell themselves it wasn't meant to be. Sometimes that is true. Sometimes it wasn't meant to be because the moment passed. This is not said to burden you, but to empower you. You are not hearing this after the fact. You are hearing it before the decision is finalized. Heaven is giving you awareness while the door is still open. That alone is mercy. Hesitation feels safe, but it slowly trains the soul to resist urgency. And once that pattern forms, it becomes harder to respond quickly in future seasons. Momentum matters in spiritual life. When you move with heaven, movement becomes familiar. When you delay repeatedly, delay becomes comfortable. The truth is simple but weighty. Hesitation does not stop God's plan, but it can remove you from its most direct expression. And the longer you wait, the easier it becomes to accept less than what was available. This is why this moment matters, not because everything depends on it, but because something significant does. You still have time. The door is not closed yet, but it will not stay open forever simply because you are thinking about it. Awareness is your advantage now, and what you do with it will determine what comes next. There comes a moment in every destiny journey where neutrality disappears. You are no longer deciding whether to move. You are deciding whether you will be the one who moves. This is that moment. When a door remains open and instruction has already been given, heaven shifts its focus from intention to action. This is not about pressure. It is about order. Divine order requires response, and response determines position. Acting now does not mean acting recklessly. It means acting obediently. There is a difference. Recklessness moves without instruction. Obedience moves because instruction has already been received. You are not being asked to invent a path. You are being asked to step onto one that has already been prepared. The danger in this moment is not failure, it is substitution. If you do not act, heaven will still accomplish its purpose, but it may do so through another willing vessel. This truth is uncomfortable, but it is also freeing. God's plans are bigger than individuals, yet He invites individuals to participate in them. Participation is a privilege, not a guarantee. When someone hesitates too long, God does not cancel the plan. He reassigns the role. This is not because God is harsh, but because timing matters. Windows require occupants. Watching others enter what you were meant to step into is one of the quiet pains of spiritual life. It is not jealousy, it is recognition. Recognition that you were close. Recognition that you felt the nudge. Recognition that you waited when you should have moved. This is why heaven speaks clearly before these moments. God would rather warn you than replace you. Acting now is often less dramatic than people imagine. It may be a single conversation, a decision to release something, a commitment you stop postponing, a step you take privately without announcing it publicly. Obedience rarely announces itself, but heaven notices every movement aligned with instruction. The reason urgency is emphasized now is because momentum is available. Momentum is not constant, it is seasonal. When momentum is present, steps feel lighter. Resistance weakens faster. Provision aligns more easily. When momentum passes, the same steps feel heavier. The path does not disappear, but the ease does. Acting now allows you to move with momentum rather than against resistance. You may be tempted to wait until fear disappears. That will not happen. Courage does not come from the absence of fear. It comes from agreement with purpose. Fear often accompanies obedience because obedience stretches identity. You are stepping into something larger than your current version. That stretching is uncomfortable, but it is also necessary. Heaven is not asking you to be perfect before you move. It is asking you to be willing. Willingness activates assistance. Angels do not move because you feel confident. They move because you act in alignment. The moment you step, support follows. Clarity increases after movement, not before it. Before we go further, pause here, because this is another moment where the mission behind this message must be spoken. As this call to act now settles in your spirit, hear this as a prophetic command, not an option. When you give through super thanks, membership, or PayPal, you are not funding content. You are igniting movement in souls who are standing where you once stood. I hear the Lord saying, those who release seed in a moment of urgency will reap acceleration in their own obedience. I am speaking to you directly now. This is your chance to move with heaven, not behind it. Let your giving become a sign of agreement with what God is doing in this hour. Obey now by supporting this mission through the PayPal link or QR code in the description, and watch how God multiplies your yes. Return with me now, because the decision before you is still active. If you act now, something shifts immediately, not always externally but internally. Peace replaces tension. Your action sharpens. Resistance loses its grip. Acting breaks the spell of hesitation. Even if the outcome is still forming, alignment brings relief. That relief is not confirmation of success. It is confirmation of obedience. If you delay, something else happens. The urgency fades. The clarity dulls. You tell yourself you will revisit the decision later. And later feels reasonable, until later becomes never. This is how doors close quietly, not with disaster, but with distraction. This is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to empower you. You are not behind. You are not disqualified. You are still at the door. But you are not meant to stand there forever. Heaven is watching for movement, not perfection. The smallest obedient step outweighs the grandest intention. You do not need to see the full path. You need to honor the instruction you already have. Type "I step forward" now in the comments if this resonates with you. Blessing code 902 is now activated. You'll be glad you stayed, because what comes next will show you how your action directly activates angelic assistance in ways you may not expect. There is a spiritual law that many people never fully understand. Heaven responds to movement, not intention, not emotion, not even desire. Wooed. When you act in obedience, something shifts instantly in the unseen realm. Angels that were standing by are released. Assignments that were paused are activated. Resistance that felt immovable begins to lose its grip. This is why action is never neutral in the spirit. Every obedient step sends a signal upward that says, I agree with heaven. Angelic assistance is not random or automatic. Angels are ministers assigned to align with God's will, and God's will advances through obedient people. When you move, angels move with you. When you hesitate, angels wait. This is not because they are limited, but because divine order requires cooperation. Heaven does not override human will, it responds to it. That is why your action matters more than your understanding. The moment you take the step God hath been prompting you toward, you may not see angels, but you will feel their effects. Delays begin to resolve. Conversations shift unexpectedly. Opportunities align without force. What felt blocked begins to open organically. This is not coincidence. This is assistance activated by obedience. Many people pray for angelic help while remaining stationary. But angels are released on the path, not at the starting point. Archangel Michael's role here becomes especially clear. He is not only a guardian of thresholds, but a commander in moments of movement. When obedience is initiated, protection increases. Resistance that once felt intimidating suddenly feels manageable. Courage strengthens. Focus sharpens. This is why fear often breaks after the first step, not before it. Angels meet you in motion. Another important truth is this: angelic assistance does not remove effort, but it multiplies effectiveness. You may still have work to do, conversations to navigate, decisions to follow through on, but you will notice that the effort produces more fruit than before. Less striving, more alignment. That is the difference between working alone and working with heaven. This is also why timing matters so much. When you act within the window God has set, assistance flows naturally. When you act outside of that window, the same action requires more force. Obedience within timing feels supported. Obedience delayed feels heavy. Heaven is inviting you to move while support is abundant. You may wonder how you will know assistance hath been activated. Look for acceleration. Look for clarity replacing confusion. Look for doors opening without manipulation. Look for peace that arrives even before results. These are signs that heaven is working alongside you. Assistance often shows up as alignment, not spectacle. This is also the moment where your testimony begins to form. Not the final outcome, but the evidence of movement. When you comment, when you share what God is doing, when you stay connected to this channel, you are not just engaging content, you are participating in a flow. Sharing this message may be the very act of obedience that activates assistance for someone else. Liking, subscribing, and commenting are not small gestures here. They are signals of agreement and readiness. If this message is confirming what God hath been stirring in you, respond to it. Comment with what you are stepping into. Share this with someone who needs courage right now. Subscribe so you remain aligned with what heaven is releasing in this season. These actions matter because obedience is often practiced in visible ways before it manifests in greater responsibilities. Do not underestimate the power of testimony, even in seed form. When you speak what God is doing, you align your words with heaven's movement. Angels respond to agreement, not silence. This is not about promotion. It is about positioning. Here is something many people overlook. Angelic assistance increases after commitment, not before it. Heaven does not wait for you to feel fully ready. It waits for you to decide. Decision activates direction. Direction activates support. If you feel a stirring right now, that is not emotional manipulation. That is recognition. Recognition that something is shifting. Recognition that you are closer than you think. Recognition that your next step carries weight. And here is your reminder in this moment. Stay with this message. What is coming next brings clarity that many people never receive, and it may answer the question you have been holding quietly in your heart. You'll want to hear this part. Because once angels are activated, the line between almost and fulfilled becomes very thin. An understanding that line will protect you from stopping too soon. Heaven is not asking you to do everything at once. It is asking you to do the next thing now. When you do, assistance follows. Always stay alert. Stay responsive. The movement has already begun. There is a line that very few people can see until they are standing on it. It is the line between almost and fulfilled, almost healed, almost free, almost there, almost walking in what God promised. This line is not marked by failure or sin. It is marked by proximity. You are close enough to see the outcome, but not yet living in it. And the danger of this line is that it convinces people they have already done enough. Many destinies stall here, not because the person turned back, but because they stopped moving forward. They assume proximity meant completion. But heaven does not reward closeness. It responds to completion. The final stretch is often the quietest, the loneliest, and the least celebrated. There are no dramatic confirmations here. No applause. Just a steady invitation to continue. This is why the enemy intensifies discouragement at this stage. Not panic, not chaos. Discouragement. A subtle voice that says you've come far enough. You can slow down now. It's okay to pause. And pausing feels harmless because you are not retreating. But pausing at the threshold is still stopping short of fulfillment. The line between almost and fulfilled is thin, but it is real. On one side is preparation, effort, prayer, endurance. On the other side is manifestation, expansion, responsibility. Crossing that line requires something many people underestimate. Follow through. Not excitement. Not inspiration. Follow through. The willingness to complete what was started, even when the emotional high has faded. You may notice that motivation feels lower now than it did earlier in the journey. That does not mean you are doing something wrong. It means you are no longer being carried by anticipation. You are being carried by commitment. Commitment is quieter than excitement, but far more powerful. Heaven honors commitment deeply because it reflects trust, not emotion. Another reason people stop at almost is because fulfillment brings visibility. What was once private becomes seen. What was once internal becomes external. And with fulfillment comes responsibility, influence, accountability, impact. Some people subconsciously avoid fulfillment because they fear what comes with it. It is easier to stay almost than to step fully into what God promised. But understand this. God did not bring you this far to leave you at the edge. The discomfort you feel now is not a signal to stop. It is a signal that the terrain is changing. You are moving from preparation ground to promised ground. And promised ground feels different. The rules shift. The expectations rise. The grace becomes more precise. This is also where comparison becomes dangerous. You may look at others and assume they have arrived while you are still waiting. But comparison distorts perception. You do not see the cost behind their fulfillment, just as others do not see yours. The only question that matters now is not where others are, but whether you will finish your own crossing. Stopping here often feels justified. You can point to effort, sacrifice, and progress. You can say, I tried. But heaven is not moved by effort alone. It is moved by obedience completed. This is not condemnation. It is invitation. An invitation to take the final steps with the same faith that started the journey. Another reason this stage feels heavy is because support often decreases. People who cheered you earlier may grow silent. Those who benefited from your preparation may not follow you into fulfillment. This is normal. Not everyone who celebrates your becoming will understand your arrival. Fulfillment attracts a different audience than preparation. You may also notice a temptation to revisit old comforts, familiar habits, familiar roles, familiar identities. not because they are better, but because they are known. The unknown always feels heavier just before it becomes familiar. This is the last pull of the old season trying to keep you from fully entering the new one. Crossing the line requires decisiveness, not urgency driven by fear, but resolve anchored in trust. Resolve says, I will finish what God started. Resolve says, I will not stop at almost. Resolve says, even if this feels lonely, I will move forward. Heaven is not asking you to sprint. It is asking you to continue. And take the next step. To complete the instruction. To follow through where others quit. Fulfillment is rarely dramatic in the moment it happens. Often, it feels like relief, like alignment, like quiet confirmation that you are where you were meant to be. You are closer than you think. The line is in front of you, not behind you. And crossing it does not require a new revelation, only obedience to the one you already received. Do not let familiarity with the journey rob you of the courage to finish it. Allest is not failure, but it is not fulfillment either. And you were not called to stop short of what God approved. The next steps will make this unmistakably clear. There are moments when heaven shifts from patience to precision. This is one of those moments. What you are sensing now is not pressure from circumstances, but alignment with divine timing. Heaven's countdown has begun, not because God is impatient, but because the window you are standing in has a purpose and an end. Countdowns are not meant to create fear. They are meant to create focus. When a countdown begins, it means everything necessary is already in place. This is why the sense of now feels stronger than ever. You are no longer in a season of preparation where time feels flexible. You are in a season of execution where timing is sacred. Heaven does not rush preparation, but it does not prolong execution. Once the moment arrives, it calls for response. And that response must come while the door remains open. Many people struggle with this phase because they confuse urgency with anxiety. But the two are not the same. Anxiety drains energy. Divine urgency sharpens it. Anxiety clouds thinking. Divine urgency clarifies it. If what you are feeling is drawing you closer to focus rather than panic, closer to obedience rather than fear, then it is not anxiety, it is alignment. The countdown you are in now is not loud. It does not announce itself with dates or deadlines. It speaks through increased clarity, heightened conviction, and reduced tolerance for delay. Things that once felt acceptable now feel heavy. Distractions lose their appeal. Excuses sound hollow. This is heaven narrowing your focus so you do not miss the moment. Another sign the countdown has begun is that waiting no longer brings peace. In earlier seasons, waiting felt wise. Now, waiting feels resistant. This is not because waiting is always wrong, but because waiting beyond timing becomes disobedience. God knows the difference, and your spirit does too. That is why the internal tension you feel will not resolve until you move. This countdown also explains why fear has become more strategic. It does not shout. It whispers. It suggests delay disguised as prudence. It encourages one more round of preparation. One more confirmation. One more sign. But heaven has already confirmed. The sign was the approval. The warning was the urgency. What remains is your response. Understand this clearly. Heaven does not count down to punish you. It counts down to position you. Every second in this window is an opportunity to align. The countdown is mercy, not threat. It is heaven saying, do not miss this. And that alone tells you how valuable this moment is. You may wonder what happens when the countdown ends. Often, nothing dramatic occurs externally. Life continues. But internally, something shifts. The urgency lifts. The clarity fades. The moment passes. And people often mistake that relief for peace. But peace does not come from avoiding obedience. It comes from fulfilling it. What feels like relief after delay is often resignation, not rest. Heaven's countdown is also personal. It is not synchronized with others. You cannot measure your timing against someone else's journey. God speaks to individuals in specific moments. That is why comparison is especially dangerous now. Someone else's pace is irrelevant to your assignment. The only thing that matters is your obedience within your window. Another reason this phase feels intense is because it marks the end of negotiation. Earlier seasons allowed questions. This season requires agreement. God is not explaining further. He is inviting you to trust what has already been revealed. That is why new information feels unnecessary. You already know enough to move. This is also why silence from heaven may feel more noticeable now. God often speaks less when timing is near, not because he has left, but because instruction has already been given. Repetition ends when responsibility begins. Heaven is not withholding guidance. It is waiting for response. You may feel a sense of finality in certain areas of your life. Not loss, but closure. Old cycles feel complete. Old identities no longer fit. This is not something to mourn. It is something to honor. Completion always precedes transition, and transition always requires courage. The countdown does not mean everything must happen at once. It means the decision must. Once the decision is made, the steps unfold. Heaven doth not demand speed, it demands commitment. When commitment is given, timing takes care of itself. This is a sacred moment. Not dramatic, not loud, but decisive. The kind of moment that quietly shapes the next chapter of your life. Years from now, you may not remember the details of this day, but you will live with the results of what you chose in it. Heaven's countdown has begun because heaven believes you are ready. The approval has been given. The warning has been spoken. The door is open. The only thing left is movement. And the next part will bring this journey to its divine close, showing you not only assurance, but the peace and strength that come when obedience is finally released. Now listen carefully, because this is where heaven does not end with pressure, but with peace. Everything you have heard until this moment was not meant to burden you. It was meant to position you. God does not reveal urgency without also releasing assurance. He does not warn without also strengthening. And he does not call you forward without promising to walk with you through the door. Here is the truth heaven wants you to receive now. You are not stepping into uncertainty alone. You are stepping into alignment. The breakthrough was approved long before you felt ready. The timing was set long before you understood why. And the strength you need has already been assigned to you for this moment. God does not send people into decisive seasons without also sending grace to carry them through. Peace does not come from knowing every detail. Peace comes from knowing who is leading you. And the reason peace is beginning to settle in your spirit right now is because something is coming into order. Even if you have not taken the step yet, the moment you choose obedience, the internal conflict will resolve. Heaven is not anxious about your future. Heaven is confident in it. Victory in this season does not look like noise or applause. It looks like clarity. It looks like alignment. It looks like quiet confidence replacing inner resistance. When you move in obedience, you will not need to force doors. They will respond. You will not need to defend your timing. It will justify itself. You will not need to explain your courage. Its fruit will speak. This is also where God reminds you of something important. Delay did not disqualify you. Doubt did not disqualify you. Fear did not disqualify you. You are still here because grace kept you here. And grace is still active. A warning with not evidence of rejection. It was evidence of trust. God warns those He intends to advance. As you step forward, you may not feel dramatic emotion. You may feel calm, grounded, focused. That is not anticlimax. That is maturity. Fulfilled obedience often feels like peace rather than excitement. The soul recognizes when it has come home to alignment. Now hear this assurance clearly. Whatever you release in obedience, God will restore in greater measure. Whatever you risk with Him, He will cover. Whatever fear you surrender, He will replace with strength. This is not motivational language. It is spiritual law. Heaven always backs obedience. Before we close, this is the final moment where the mission behind this message must be sealed. As this message comes to rest in your spirit, I speak to you not as a viewer, but as a fellow carrier of this calling. When you give through Super Thanks, membership, or PayPal, you are not donating. You are sowing into open heavens for souls who are one message away from obedience. I hear the Lord saying, those who align their resources with my word will see rivers open where there were deserts. I am inviting you personally now. This is your prophetic response moment. Do not delay what God is prompting you to do. Obey now by supporting this mission through the PayPal link in the description or the PayPal QR code on screen, and receive the blessing released upon those who help carry this message forward. Now receive this final assurance. You are not late. You are not behind. You are not unqualified. You are standing exactly where you need to be to choose rightly. Heaven's countdown was not to rush you, it was to awaken you. And now, peace is being released because decision is near. Whatever step God has placed before you, take it with confidence. You do not need to rush the process, just honor the instruction. The door you were warned about is not fragile, it is precise. And when you walk through it, you will realize that heaven was not threatening closure, it was inviting completion. Let this be the moment you stop circling and start crossing. Let this be the moment obedience becomes action. Let this be the moment you trust that God's approval carries everything you need. Type "I walk in alignment" in the comments if this message has spoken to you. Blessing code 1184 is now activated. May peace guard your heart. May courage steady your steps. May clarity light your path. And may you walk boldly into what heaven has already approved. This door is still open. Now walk through it.